This has never been done. No one have been in the area at all with a remote control camera.
The robotic camera's survey revealed many shapes and objects familiar to Mueller, including coral formations with right angles, arches, discs, and straight shafts fused into larger masses that had the appearance of twisted wreckage.
Now, when we have been able to go back and forth with a remote control camera, we can repeatedly see that these strange structures we are looking for are there. Not at one place, but you see them again and again and again. There are situations where you see something that looks like an axle, a hub, something that looks like a wheel, and you say to yourself, this is not a coral reef, this is a coral growth on an artifact. And that is what's different to me when I compare corals at other locations around the world.
Since the earliest explorations at MAWAAHBA, one distinctive type of formation has often been identified on the sea floor. A slender, table-like structure, sometimes standing on end, with a coral-encrusted base, a straight shaft, and a circular top.
It's a 90-degree angle, a right angle, between something that looks like an axle and the wheel. And you can see this in different varieties, and it looks very different from normal coral growth. And it is like a man-made structure with a coral growth on it.
In the midst of them, Pan photographed this circular object attached to what appears to have been a broken axle or hub. This discovery was significant for two reasons. Pan had documented the coral-encrusted form of a wheel with dimensions similar to ancient Egyptian artifacts directly across from the proposed MAWAAHBA crossing site. Her find also provided independent confirmation of earlier evidence establishing wheel-like formations on both coasts of the Red Sea in accordance with descriptions in the biblical record.
And the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army, and he made the wheels of their chariots come off.
All right. Shalom. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai, Bahashem, Racha Kodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahabashai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahabashai is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahabashai. And pretty much I want to do this video, this showing according to the scriptures that the Israelites, they crossed the northern part of the Red Sea, which is the Gulf of Suez. All right. It's important to know that because that's what's in the scriptures. And even when you read Exodus 15 and 22, which I'm going to read that for you, right? And I also have map illustration to show you that when you read the scriptures, proof that we crossed the Gulf of Suez is when you go to the Hebrew word for red and you scroll down to the biblical usage on the Blue Letter Bible. It literally tells you Gulf of Suez as one of the biblical definitions, all right? And then you can see when you read Exodus 15 to 22, where the Israelites, ended up on dry ground at once they crossed the northern part of the Red Sea, which is the Gulf of Suez. All right, so it's not gonna be a long lesson. Should be under like 20 minutes. All right, and these are all videos that we all did, beginning with Apostle Tahar and down. But a lot of topics that I went into, I gotta go into it again because my channels get taken down. But it's all good though. The show must go on. So this is what I typed in, right? Let's go up here. I typed in the Israelites didn't cross the Red Sea, too much salt. Because that's what scholars, that's what unbelievers, atheists, that's what they would say. Oh, there's no proof, there's no archaeological proof that the Israelites crossed the Red Sea. That's why I showed you the intro. That's proof right there of what they found. And proof of that is Exodus 14. So it says the idea that the Israelites cross a body of water with less salt is based on the original Hebrew phrase. This is their version of Hebrew. All right. The true Hebrew is the Lashawan Quadash, which stands for the holy tongue or the holy language, which is the Paleo Hebrew, or what scholars call Phoenician Hebrew, because the Phoenicians, they spoke Hebrew. All right. The Paleo Hebrew, which is the correct one, not this new modern Ben Yahudi Hebrew. So it says phrase Yam Suf, which translates to the Sea of Reeds rather than the Red Sea, because papyrus and salt-tolerant weeds or reeds grow in fresh or marshy waters rather than hypersaline seas. Many scholars suggest the crossing happened in a shallow northern lake or marsh. Yeah, which ultimately that would be what? The northern part of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Suez. All right. So that's pretty much it with that. So let's go here now. So I typed in the Israelites crossed the Red Sea and ended up where? And then I typed in Bible scripts because I'm asking AI a question, right? Which I know the answer, but I'm preparing the lesson. So it says, according to the book of Exodus in the Bible, after the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they emerged onto opposite shore and entered the wilderness of Shur. So when you read Exodus 15 and 22, it shows you where they end up. And when you look left of the body of sea that's there, that's the northern part of the Red Sea, which is the Gulf of Suez. All right. Let me see if I got a map. See? The wilderness of Shur right here. You see that? So this is the Gulf of Suez right here. This is the Red Sea. And you can see it splits. You got the Gulf of Aqaba right there in the east. And then the western northern part is what? The Gulf of Suez, as you can see right there on the map. And when they cross the Gulf of Suez, which is the northern part of the Red Sea, or what they call the Sea of Reeds, right? It says that we ended up in the wilderness of Shur. So you can see where we walked through. All right, and where we ended up on our way to the promised land. So I'm gonna keep that open. All right, let's go down here. It says, yep, the first stops in the desert travel. They walk for 3 days through the dry wilderness without finding any water, Marah. And this is in Exodus 16, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, it says, so that's pretty much it with that. All right, so let's read a little bit of the scriptures. This is the NLT version. This is Exodus 14 to 15. Now, what you saw in the intro of the video was archaeological evidence, which is physical proof that this story that you read about in the Bible concerning the Israelites and the Egyptians, that's a real thing that happened in history, in real life. So NLT, Exodus 14 and 15, you see the headline, meaning this is what these particular verses or the chapter is going to be going into. This is the subject, escape through the Red Sea, right? Exodus 14 and 15, NLT. Then Yahweh said to Moses, the word Lord is in caps, so that's talking about the God of Israel, Yahweh, right? Said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. Pick up your staff and raise up your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground, right? It says, and I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, meaning their mind, their spirit, and they will charge in after the Israelites. My great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops and his chariots and his charioteers. Because when you read Romans 9 and 17, as well as in the book of Exodus, it might be the same chapter, Exodus 9, but I'm not sure. It literally tells you that the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, All right, he raised up Pharaoh so that his name as the true and living God could be declared throughout all the earth. All right. The same thing is happening with the modern day Pharaoh, which is the Edomites, the so-called white men in sea line. All right, beginning with the top tribe of Edom, which is Amalek, which is the Zionists. All right, these Hasidic Jews, these Jews. All right, these Jewish people that are Edomite converts. It says, 18, when my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord. That's why the Lord, through Moses, he plagued Egypt to mock those gods that they worship, which I did a video on that. All right. It says, then the angel of the Most High, who had been leading the people of Israel, which if you could receive it, this was Yahushua. Paul explains that, and I believe it's either 1st or 2nd Corinthians, the 10th chapter, the first 5th or the first 5 verses. All right. NLT, it says, move to the rear of the camp. It says, the pillar of cloud, which this cloud, it was an actual spaceship. All right, it was a chariot of the Most High, so-called UFO, UAP. That's the vehicles that the angels use to travel in. That's how the Messiah is coming back. All right. It says the pillar of cloud also moved from the front and stood behind them. So this was a spaceship. This was a moving vehicle. That's what led the Israelites through the wilderness. All right, pillar of fire so they could see at night where to walk, where to journey through the wilderness on their way to the promised land. All right, continuing on. It says the cloud settled between the Egyptian and the Israelite camps. As darkness fell, the cloud turned to fire, lighting up the night. It says, but the Egyptians and Israelites did not approach each other all night because they couldn't. It says, then Moses raised his hand over the sea, and Yahweh opened up a path through the water with a strong east wind. Right? So it's not just Moses doing these miracles, it's the Most High using Moses to do these miracles on earth for the purpose of glorifying his name and delivering the Israelites. It says, the wind blew all that night, turning the seabed into dry land so that the Israelites could walk. So the people of Israel walked through the middle of the sea on dry ground with walls of water on each side. Then the Egyptians, all the Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and charioteers chased them into the middle of the sea. But just before dawn, Yahweh looked down on the Egyptian army from the pillar of fire and cloud, and he threw their forces into total confusion. He twisted their chariot wheels, making their chariots difficult to drive. Let's get out of here, away from these Israelites, the Egyptians shouted. The Lord, right, Yahweh, is fighting for them against Egypt. When all the Israelites had reached the other side, the Lord said to Moses, raise your hand over the sea again, then the waters will rush back and cover the Egyptians and their chariots and their charioteers. So as the sun began to rise, Moses raised his hand over the sea, and the water rushed back into its usual place. The Egyptians tried to escape, but Yahweh swept them into the sea. Then the waters returned and covered all the chariots and charioteers, the entire army of Pharaoh. It says, of all the Egyptians who had chased the Israelites into the sea, not a single one survived. All right? And that was proof, physical proof that took place with the intro of this video. And you could search this up yourself. The chariot wheel was discovered in 1978 in the seabed of the Red Sea. Why the seabed? Because the waters were still on each side. And then the Lord collapsed the water. All right? So they drowned. Because that miracle was only for the Israelites to escape the Egyptians. It wasn't for the Egyptians. It says, Moses and our ancestors, the Hebrew Israelites, did walk across the Red Sea, which is the Gulf of Suez, the northern part or the western part of the Red Sea. All right? So this is a real thing right here. This ain't some fake ass story that you're reading, you know, like a fiction. Like we grown men with like little boy minds. No, this is real. We worship the true and living God. All right? We don't need physical proof to believe, because through Yahweh we have the gift of faith, but there is archaeological evidence that prove the scriptures. And there's other books that prove the scriptures. All right? So there you go. The Most High drowned the Egyptians. Their heart, meaning their spirit, was hardened. And he did that on purpose. That was a part of his plan. That's what he predestinated. So it says, so that's pretty much it with that. All right? Most High drowned them. So now, I forgot to get that precept though. Let me go back. Exodus 15. So this is Exodus 15 and verse 22. I'm trying to speed this up for the sake of time. So it says Exodus 15 to 22. It says, so Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea. When you go into this word red, you go into the Hebrew word for it. The biblical usage literally tells you Gulf of Suez. All right, that's what it is. It's the Gulf of Suez, the northern part of the Red Sea. Red Sea, Sea of Reeds, but it was the northern part of the Red Sea. That's why scholars be arguing with people, and they say scientifically they went through a place that had less salt. All right, it's the northern part of the Red Sea. It says, so Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, right, Gulf of Suez, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. All right, the wilderness of Shur, as you can see right here. See? They would have to walk all the way up through the Gulf of Suez, which is one of them definitions, right? And in order for you to end up east to the wilderness of Shur, you got to walk through that. All right, they had to walk through that seabed, dry ground, while the waters was up on each side. All right. So there you go. So that's proof right there. They crossed the Gulf of Suez. It says, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Let me just read in the NLT. See if it got a little more for me. NLT version, Exodus 15 and 22. Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out into the desert of Shur. So when it says wilderness, it's talking about desert, or like the Negev, right? They travel into this desert for 3 days without finding any water. All right, then it's more what they account, Meribah. So that's pretty much it. I just want to prove to you that the Israelites, they crossed the northern part of the Red Sea, which is the Gulf of Suez. All right, so that's proof. So Lord willing, you was edified. Shalom.